we exist as a quasi-government institution that is mandated to develop the capital markets in Zambia, with the sole aim of ensuring that we make the rightful contribution to economic development of the country. So we hope that by the end of today's media brief, you, our friends and partners in the media, will disseminate this information to the rest of the country so that we have more participation from everyone that is interested in developing the country. So I'm presenting this, as Mbanga said, on behalf of the Chief Executive Officer, who's unable to do it today. So in terms of 2025, it was a very exciting year, I must say, for the capital markets. What we noticed is that it was a transformative period for the Zambian capital markets, characterized by a lot of growth, a lot of investor participation, and sustained regulatory development reforms led by the Commission. In terms of the key number that we are always reporting to the public, savings mobilized increased 53%, rising to 338 billion by the end of 2025. This was driven by increases in participation, especially in collective investment schemes, where we saw the number of investors rising to 1.7 million investors as at the end of December 2025. But more importantly, in terms of values, this was driven by the rise in the market capitalization on the Lusaka Securities Exchange, which accounts for about 97% of the savings mobilized in the Zambian capital markets. So we saw the LUSE growing about 53% in terms of market capitalization from January to December. So that's quite a huge jump. I don't think we've had such a huge jump in the history of the Zambian capital markets. Another ratio that we want the public that we monitor as a regulator is the market cap to GDP ratio. This actually hit 50% and this surpassed our capital markets master plan target of 33%. So this simply means that the market capitalization was almost 50% of the economic activity in the country, and I think that's something that we should be proud of as a country. In terms of what drove the market capitalization to increase, we had some quite significant increases in share prices, notably Zambia Metal Fabricators, which increased over 1,000%, African Mining Explosives, which increased 312%, British American Tobacco, which increased 264% over the year, Airtel Networks, 217% increase, and finally Chilanga Cement, 214%. So this really explains why there was that huge jump in the savings mobilized, because generally the prices of shares on the Lusaka Securities Exchange PLC increased. Another key development that we want to share, which happened in 2025, was that two listed companies, Zambia Consolidated Copper Mines PLC and Copperbelt Energy, reached the $1 billion market capitalization in 2025. Again, this is quite exciting for us because it signals that there's increased optimism in terms of investing in capital markets, but also it means that as a jurisdiction, people are now beginning to pay attention, and we have large market cap companies on our listed exchange. Another area that we were quite excited about was the LUSE alternative market, where we had a company known as .com Zambia PLC, which was the first ever SME to list on the alternative tier of the LUSE. This attracted over 1,400 investors, and if you've been following the stock, you'll notice that it's doing quite well. The significance of this is that it does provide capital markets as an option for SMEs to access capital markets in order for them to raise the funding that they need in order for them to grow. So every time we hear people talk about SME financing, at least now we do have an example of a company that has actually done it. And for people that are interested, especially you, the media, it would be good for you to actually follow up with .com, how they did it. Do they have any tips for other SMEs that would like to be in this space? Instead of just hearing it from us, the regulator, because we'll always give you the regulatory side. But it would be good for the media to also follow up with .com and hear the .com story, and perhaps we can have more SMEs come on board. I did allude to investor participation. So without investor participation, you and I, companies, pensions, and all manner of investors participating in capital markets, it means that there's no resource mobilization, because the extra savings that we have and we channel through capital markets result in capital flowing to companies such as .com, CEC, and all these other companies that I've talked about. So in terms of investors, we closed at 1,760, or rather 1.7 million investors as at the end of 2025. And this is a jump from the 800,000 that we had in 2024. So this growth is driven primarily in the collective investment scheme. So it's driven primarily by retail investors who make up approximately 92% of the investor base. So as we've shared with the media before, this growth is primarily driven by technology. So a lot of the investors, this 1.7 million people, they're actually using their mobile phones to invest. And from a financial inclusion point of view, it means that a lot of our citizens now have easy access to financial instruments. If you have been following the history of financial services in Zambia, it hasn't been quite an easy journey. But we are glad now that investors anywhere in Zambia are able to get capital markets products, to be specific, using their mobile phones. So it's an area that's quite exciting to us. And we've also made sure that it's an area of focus for us in terms of making sure that we enable as many Zambians to access capital markets, especially using technology. It goes without saying that the developments that I've just talked about have really been driven by the more stable macroeconomic environment. So if you listen to business people, they are always talking about the macros, and the macros really, they are just talking about what is the inflation rate, what are the exchange rates looking like, what are the interest rates looking like. So if you've been following the story in 2025, you'll notice that inflation dropped. I think this year we've even managed to hit single digits. So in terms of capital markets, for us, it does help, because if inflation falls, it means we have more disposable income. So your savings rate go up, and a lot of that we hope can also be channeled into capital markets. Stable exchange rates are also quite important, because a huge chunk of our investors are foreign-based. So stable exchange rates make it very easy on both sides to plan your investments into the country. Whilst all this has been happening, the Commission has also continued with its investor education initiatives. And this is one area where we also appreciate the role that the media plays, because once you put us out there that there's an institution called the Securities and Exchange Commission, there's an animal called capital markets, the members of the general public then become aware. But what we hope to do is to go beyond awareness to participation, so that money can start flowing into these areas. So in 2025, the Commission held over 30 major investor awareness activities. And these activities range from even this kind of media briefings that we have. We held 4 of them last year. We attended almost all the major agriculture and commercial shows that were held around the country. We reached all 10 provinces of the country last year through our national debate our national capital markets debate. We held an essay writing competition where we invited our students to participate in capital markets by submitting articles to the commission. So we did reach all 4 corners of the country, or at least all 10 provinces. And our outlook, as you will note, for next year is to actually do better. So in terms of using technology, I alluded to one particular market player that uses technology. We've also latched onto that, especially our social media. And we were able to achieve a social media reach of 2.1 million. So this means through direct hits, reshares, and so on. So if you've been following how social media works, you do a post, that post is then posted to somebody else, and by the end of 2025, we managed to reach 2.1 million. And for us, that's quite a significant milestone, because then it means that we are effectively utilizing these platforms. But again, like I said, what we hope to see is, with all these initiatives that we've talked about, is that the real impact will be adding to the 1.7 million investors that we managed to capture in 2025, and hoping that we'll reach even higher heights in the years to come. Ladies and gentlemen, with every good thing, inevitably there's someone else who wakes up every morning to do the exact opposite. So we are not immune to wrongdoing. So one of the things that you notice is that we are very vigilant in terms of our supervisory work. And what that has culminated is in 2025, we had to strengthen our enforcement posture. And what we noted in 2025 is that we had a lot more cases in terms of investigations and enforcement actions that were undertaken by the Commission. So in 2025, investigation cases increased 63% to 31. In 2024, we had only 19. But this goes without saying that it probably went up because of the increased market activity. So where there's increased market activity, unfortunately, even the wrongdoers also try to take advantage. A lot of these cases were closed, and we only closed with 5 cases as at the end of 2025. In terms of the sanctions that we took when these cases were concluded, they included censures, fines, market bans, forfeiture of assets, supervisory directives, and administrative fines, which increased from to 1 million in 2025. So the rise in these cases, other than the fact that there's increased activity, is also the increase in our market surveillance. So one of the things that we do as the Commission is we surveil the market to make sure that there's no wrongdoing, to detect it, and make sure that we take appropriate action. So there was a lot of market surveillance, a lot of increased public awareness. So the public became aware of what a wrong looks like, and they were able to alert us so that action could be undertaken. All these underscore the importance of investor protection. As a Commission, our mantra is investor protection starts with the investors, and investor protection starts with investor awareness. So this, I think, for 2025, for us was a good year in terms of making sure that we don't have wrongdoing in the market. In 2025, we also launched the Frauds and Scams Awareness Campaign. As you may know, I think scams are everywhere. I don't know your experience, but I get at least one scams message every day. I'm Dr. So-and-so, that money that you sent, use this number, or you can make 10,000 kwacha in a day. So we do still see a lot of those scams. So we launched a deliberate Frauds and Scams Awareness Campaign. And so far, we've issued 15 warnings. Some of them, I think you may have seen our warnings. There are things like Lee Auto, Triple Lift, PMG, AJ Zambia, and Apatex Zambia, just to mention a few. So if you went to our socials, you should be able to find these announcements. And I hope none of us were scammed in any of these. But the message for us still out to members of the public is, if you see something that you think is suspicious, please do alert any of the regulators, and we've come up with mechanisms where we quickly take actions to address this. So this really highlights our overall approach in terms of an integrated approach to market development, investor education, enforcement, and fraud prevention, because we are calling for people to invest in capital markets, but we also want people to be very safe in terms of how they invest through capital markets. I'll end with our outlook for 2026. So 2025 was quite an exciting year for us, but like any ambitious institution operating in Zambia now, we want to do more in 2026. So in 2026, we'll prioritize increased stakeholder participation to drive market transactions. And the simple reason for that is transactions are what really drive capital markets, are what really ensure that there's economic development. So without market transactions, there's no need for us to invite people to participate in capital markets and so on. So in order to achieve all these things, the Commission will prioritize service delivery by optimizing and rationalizing our own operational processes and systems. So you will see us talk a lot about introducing licensing systems and automating a lot of our processes. And this is in a bid to improve our operational efficiency and ensure that we address matters of service delivery. In terms of our outward focus, we will continue encouraging participation by SMEs on the loose alternative market. We are encouraging corporates to issue corporate bonds. We'll continue to encourage the scaling up of green finance instruments. We already have the green bonds that have been issued. If you are following last year, one bank, Zanaco, already notified the nation that they intend to issue a sustainability bond. So we intend to encourage more such issuances in terms of ensuring that we create an enabling environment for these things to happen. But also in terms of encouraging retail participation, I did talk about digital tools. This will continue to be an area of focus for the Commission in order to make sure that as many Zambians as possible participate in capital markets. And if there are any impediments, we begin to address them both as capital markets, but also as the broader financial services sector. All this, we believe, will ensure that we achieve, sorry, I think I lost my chain. So all these initiatives, ultimately, we hope will boost trading volumes on the LUCE and other platforms, that they will support capital formation, enhance investor confidence in the Zambian capital markets, and ultimately position the Zambian capital markets as a resilient and competitive investment destination. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, we'll share the media brief, but suffice to say that that's the summary of what is contained in the detailed document that we share with the public. I'll end my media brief presentation here, and I can take any questions from the media. Thank you. Is that your question? Please just state your name, which media institution you're coming from.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Nonde Sichilima. I'm from Zambian Business Times newspaper. Last time, the Commission mentioned that they were in talks to listing on Morgan Stanley Capital International. And I just wanted to find out that with 3 companies now reaching a $1 billion capitalization, what's the update on that?
Okay, thank you. Moranga, do you want to take that?
Thank you. I think that's a very important question, and maybe for those that may not be aware as to what the target of attaining Morgan Stanley Capital International rating is, I think it's an important classification for us to attain as a capital markets because it basically tries to signal the level of development of our capital markets and just to communicate to potential investors, both foreign and domestic, that we are doing well as capital markets, and it gives confidence to them to possibly invest in our capital markets. So we have been engaging with the Morgan Stanley itself, and they've already started guiding us through the process towards attaining that rating. But I think of significance, and while you've alluded to some of the developments that have happened, from a perspective of market capitalization, I think that is one of the criteria that we can confidently say we are now able to achieve in terms of being admitted, but there is still some criteria where we need to improve. And one such criteria is that of attaining a liquid market. Currently, we do not have the sufficient liquidity to be listed onto the Morgan Stanley Capital International. So we are working closely with the Lusaka Securities Exchange, and we have officers that have been designated both from the Commission and the LUSA to try and see how the improvement of the liquidity in the markets can be enhanced. So I think that is an ongoing process, and I will probably keep you updated throughout the process. Thanks. I think it's about 2.5 as a minimum, 2.5%.
And currently
it's under 1%.
It's
0.03% from the last we calculated. That was at Q3 2025. That's the latest figure that we have.
So just to cement what Mbanga has talked about, so traditionally in Zambia, a lot of investors buy to hold. So once they buy, that's it, they hold on to whatever stock they've bought. But what the Morgan Stanley index needs is for a lot of people to be actively buying and selling, because that reflects how easy it is for you and I, once we buy a particular stock and we are pressed and we need to get money quickly, that the turnover really reflects how easy it is for you to get out of capital markets and cash out. So the very fact that we are below 1% has always been a concern. Even when you look at the capital markets master plan, one of the things that's always talked about is market liquidity. When someone comes in and says, if I buy shares, how easy is it for me to get out of this? So a simple example is if you look at even just generally in life, there are certain things that you know that when you get them, it's very easy for you to sell them. An example is a Corolla versus a Mercedes-Benz. Everybody knows that it's very easy for you to sell a Toyota Corolla because there are buyers who are readily able to buy that. But for a Mercedes-Benz, people start telling you things about, no, the spares are difficult to find once it reaches. So that's how you can roughly translate what we mean by liquidity. So in order for us to achieve that frontier market listing, we have to show that our market is very active. It reacts to the situation on the ground. When something happens on the ground, there's a movement in terms of trades on the market. Right now, it doesn't respond that well, and that's one of the things that my colleagues were talking about that needs to be fixed. Any other questions? Maybe we can take 3 short tweets.
Good morning, Director.
Good morning.
My name is Daniel from Zambian Business Finance.
Okay.
You mentioned that last day you did investigate some questions. I just try to get the details. Is it possible for you maybe to disclose the names of some of those questions?
Okay. It's not possible for me to to go into the details like any other regulator, because some of those cases may have proceeded into further investigation with the law enforcement agencies, and some of them may indeed be before the courts of law. So if you noticed from my presentation, I did mention the ones where we did public announcements, just to alert the public that be careful when you're dealing with these ones, they're not licensed and so on. So we still have to be quite careful in terms of what we disclose, because we may hamper further investigations and so on. But what I can disclose with you is that our investigations are staged. So there are things that we close off at the level of the commission, and those are the ones where you see us meting out administrative fines, because the law does allow the chief executive officer to compound or reduce the penalty that's prescribed in the law by as much as half, if there's especially where there's admission by the capital market operator that's been involved in wrongdoing. Then there are some where they may not be within our jurisdictions. For example, if it involves fraud, then it means we have to refer it to the Zambia Police Fraud Investigations Unit to take that one up. If it involves money laundering, it means that we have to refer it to the Drug Enforcement Commission Anti-Money Laundering Unit. So some of the cases have to do with jurisdiction. So as long as it's not within our jurisdiction, those are the cases that you hear us say that we are working with other law enforcement agencies. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay.
Maybe Director, maybe just to also get details. You mentioned that there were some companies that posted in terms of, an increase in terms of market performance. Okay. One of them, I think, is Zamefa.
Okay.
Maybe just to get a comment, like what can you attribute the increase?
Okay. Perhaps not commenting to Zamefa in itself, but just generally across the counters where we've seen a significant jump in the market capitalization. So one of the things is when you look at the fundamentals, you find that they've done well in terms of financial performance. Some of them have invested heavily in infrastructure, so that has tended to boost up their production. And speaking to some of them, what they'll tell you is they didn't do it in 2025 alone. They've had these expansion programs running, some of them running as long as 10 years. So this is when they are now beginning to bear fruit in 2025. And then for some of them, even when you do the technical analysis, for some of them, there's just been a lot of increased investor interest in those particular stocks. So it's a bit of psychology, like you can't really explain why there's sudden interest other than looking at doing a fundamental analysis. But those are the key factors that tend to drive our share prices up. For some of them, we suspect it may be the use of mobile apps, like the Luce mobile app, and we may see some people push some of those share prices up. So it's quite difficult to say categorically for some of the share prices why they've gone up. But for the ones where we've done fundamental and technical analysis, where it actually tallies with that analysis that it's being reflected in the share price. But speaking to your question, and this is a challenge again I would pose to you as members of the media. One of the things is when you see some of these changes, there's nothing that stops you from going to the managing director of Zamefa and asking these questions of them to say, your share price has gone up. what is going on in the company. What should members of the public know about your company and whether they should be investing in your company and so on, because they might actually have more insights into what has driven the share price than even what the regulator may be able to have. So it's a mixture of a lot of events. I did talk about the macros as well. We shouldn't ignore the significant impact that the macros have had on the performance of companies, not just the ones that are listed on the stock market, but generally across the country. If a stable foreign exchange for a company that imports a lot, you find that it's got a significant impact in terms of their bottom line and so on. So it's quite a mix of factors that could explain the performance. But all of it points to investor perceptions. Just to drive the point home, I don't know if you've been following the international media in terms of AI. Last month, I think investors were spooked by the very fact that AI can replace human beings. So the AI stocks actually fell briefly. And I think now is when they're beginning to rally again. So that's the mind of an investor. So some will rely on technical and fundamental analysis. Some will just rely on emotions and they'll drive a share price up. Thank you. Any other questions? I can see questions on people's faces, but they're not coming out. Please ask. In capital markets, we answer every question. Yes, please. Yes.
I think I have a question on the alternative market. Looking at companies like the focus and listing. With what is happening around, looking at the potential that the alternative market has, what strategies have been put or can be put in place to increase MSME participation and awareness of the loose alternative market? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that question. And I think it's the typical SME funding question. So if you look at all the regulators, including the Commission, we've put in a lot of strategies. One of them is engagement. We've talked to a lot of SMEs. What is it that stops them from coming to capital markets? And that is how the alternative tier for listing was born. So it's actually a deliberate strategy that on the alternative market, the requirements for listing are actually less stringent than what you have on the main board. But that doesn't mean that it's a less valuable platform, but it actually just speaks to a deliberate effort by a government agency to ensure that we make it as easy as possible for SMEs to list on the market. There's also been strategies, for example, to waive fees on that market. So if an SME says, I don't have enough money to list on this tier, it's too expensive for me to list, there is an incentive I think for the first 10 companies that come on that tier, they won't pay any fees. There's also strategies such as getting the SMEs ready to list on the tier. As you can imagine, a lot of our SMEs are highly informal. They do not do audited accounts. They are not organized. They do not have business plans, but they have the dream and the vision. And the truth of the matter is a lot of our economy in Zambia is driven by SMEs. So even in that disorganized state that we tend to find them in, there is deliberate strategies to make sure that we provide what are known as business development services to them. We help them get organized, put their proposals in a format that investors easily understand. We help them do their financial statements. We give them what is known as a designated advisor So they are the ones who do the complicated processes, for example, interacting with the Lusaka Securities Exchange, interacting with the with the commission in terms of what needs to be required. So what that does is it puts a bridge between the SME, they run with their own everyday things that they're really excited about, and on this side, they're able to come and list on the market. So there's been several initiatives like that. Other things that Mwanga maybe can speak to is we've got, in terms of financing instruments in the capital markets, there's been discussions, for example, in terms of can we form an SME fund that brings 10,000 SMEs and only one instrument is listed on the exchange. What that does is you don't have to worry about managing 10,000 SMEs. You have a fund manager that does that, but the instrument itself is what is listed on the capital markets. So there is a lot of initiatives like that in terms of either direct financing to the SME or financing them through other capital markets vehicles such as your collective investment schemes, your private equity funds, and your venture capital funds. On the part of private equity funds, you'll be happy to note that we've actually got three private equity funds that have been authorized by the Commission. And so far, 2 of those have actually been launched. So that's another initiative that's been taken through capital markets to try and make sure that SMEs that are ready actually access funding through the capital markets. It's a long journey. It's not an easy one, but I'm glad that you asked the question. Again, that's some more homework for you to reach out to SMEs that have said they've tried to reach capital markets and they've not been able to. Please do direct them to us so that we can also begin to have those kinds of conversations as to why they haven't come. In Zambia, I think there's a phrase in Bemba, tulatini no kutali. We've become afraid of things from a distance. You see a fancy building, you hear a fancy term, you think, no, this is not for me. But the truth of the matter is capital markets are for every Zambian, starting with the people in this room and every Zambian out there that is looking to make a saving, to save for school fees, whatever their needs are, capital markets are for everyone. Thank you. Okay. I take it there are no more questions. So it remains for me to sincerely thank you for coming and joining us for today's media brief. We will continue with our engagements throughout the year. And indeed, we'll make it a deliberate effort as well to invite you for all these engagements that we'll be undertaking, all our activities as much as possible, just to make sure that you follow the journey with us, even as we are undertaking some of our activities in our bid to grow the market as defined under the Securities Act. With those few remarks, I thank you and have a good day. Thank you.